Hey guys, doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, I thought we can have a discussion today on grooming. I want to revisit this topic because it's definitely relevant. I've done topics like this before. If you watch my playlist for the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case, you'll see definitely a lot on grooming, and also recently on Hailey, Buzbee and Madison Fields. I thought I can kind of borrow from those cases a little bit because there's some context here, but I kind of want to focus it in general. I think it's a topic that needs to be put out there a little bit more because the game for the predator is changed. We know that. As you see on the title of this video, I have they're no longer strangers to our children. And that's 100% accurate. And I think that we have to understand that. And sadly, they build their relationship with our children through platforms that they're more familiar with, through technology that they're more familiar with. And sadly, as much as some of us could be on top of our children, they build these apps that are secretive, that evolve or update with greater levels of secrecy, that even if you are a great parent, because I'm learning this as we go along as well, my opinion's starting to grow, they're always going to get ahead of you. They're extremely innovative. You know, when I work in a prison, sometimes we look at the inmates that have nothing and think that, you know, they are, to some extent, the ones that would be the least amount of concern, and they're not. They're usually the ones that are most innovative, and we have to always find our ways to get ahead of the games that they play. This would be more of like, it's not checkers because we can't constantly be in reactionary mode. It is more of chess. We have to think ahead. Actually, I have books that relate to manipulation that apply to the real world. The predator doesn't change, just the environment does a little bit. But inmate manipulation, Coded, and Breaking Boundaries are two good books I have on Amazon that can easily be applied to predators in the outside world. So if you guys ever want to get those books, I would recommend it. And then you could take the lessons and find how they apply to your world. So what I would like to do is I got some questions here that I would like to answer. I've been set my way, but I also want to provide a little context. So we already know the old stranger danger model doesn't match how kids are targeted now. Most child sexual abuse victims know their abuser in some capacity, not as a random stranger, but as someone who has been allowed into their life and trust. So in 2026, that known person can be a favorite teammate on Roblox, a streamer they follow on Twitch, or a musician they talk to in Discord servers. The new predator embeds themselves in a child's digital world until they feel like part of the daily routine, then runs the same pipeline over and over. I want you to remember this. Familiarity to trust, trust to isolation, isolation to exploitation. That's the four that I could think of. So again, familiarity, trust, isolation, exploitation. I see that in the prison world. I see it in the online social media platforms as well. The cases of Hailey Buzbee and Celeste Rivas Hernandez both highlight how deadly that pattern can become once it moves offline. Scary when, in the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case, when the celebrity reaches back to you. Imagine what she's thinking. It's a celebrity in her mind. And I broke that down. You guys have got to see my playlist on Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and you got to see the playlist I have on Hailey Buzbee and Madison Fields, because we touch on these. So one of the first questions I got is, how has our focus on stranger danger left families unprepared for predators who become familiar, even beloved figures in a child's online life? You know, I was looking at the Amber Alert and some of the cases that we follow here. Hailey Buzbee, Madison Fields, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. When we label the child as a runaway, or the child is labeled as a runaway, there's not that many resources that go out to try to find that child, because sadly, the way this kind of works is runaway is on the lesser level, the lower tier of urgency. I'm not saying it's not urgent. I don't want to badmouth anybody here because this is really just an effort to fix what's wrong. But it's on the lower level because they'll see a child that could have left because of the choice they made as opposed to being abducted. And I get it, a choice versus abduction. I get that. But one, they're a child and their choices really aren't always going to be the best. So we have to take that into consideration. I mentioned in prior shows, I mean, if you have a child that commits a crime, we're very quick. Advocacies for juveniles will come out and say, hey, that child didn't know what they're doing. Their prefrontal lobe, whatever it is, that they're not thinking things through. They're more impulsive. Well, you got to assume that plays out also for children who run away. They may not always be thinking clearly, or the scarier part is they could be influenced. And now with social media, the gaming, there is a chance that could be the case. Bo Buzbee is trying to create laws to fill the gap that I believe the Amber laws either need to be expanded on or have limitations in. But basically, it's not so much about the child being labeled as a runaway, but it's looking at the child as what are they running towards? That's a question that I think has to be asked. Even if you have video of the child all packed up and going on their way, we have to ask, where are they going? That's an extremely important question because we want to know who is on the other side. If a child never ran away before, and this is their first time, why do they feel so comfortable doing that? Who's on the other side that's influencing that child to run away from home? And as I said, you're going to see the steps from familiarity to trust to isolation to exploitation. But there's a lot in there that's played that aids the child in making that choice. These are expert predators. And trust and believe in the prison system, they can get adults. 100%. We have a lot of adults that have been caught up in the system. So a child with no experience is an easy game. It's an easy game. So the first lesson we have to learn here, maybe two, is we have to always be wary of the people that are predators may not always be strangers to our children. Maybe strangers to us because we may not be so familiar with our children's world. And that sometimes because they keep it hidden from us. And as much as we try to get ahead of it, technology is built in a way for it to be more secretive. How scary is that? You know, you find a route. I know my child's doing this, and next week there's an update, and now the child finds another way, aided by the experienced predator. So again, we have to automatically assume that when our child goes missing, are they running towards something, and are they running towards someone that they know that makes them feel safe? You know, back in, when I was a kid, we didn't have social media and stuff like that. Scary thought would be a kid be taken out of park, and you always go to the park and you'd be hyper vigilant because these predators were just watching and they were looking for vulnerabilities, not just so much for the child, but the environment the child is in. If the parent's distracted, that's going to be the kid I'm going to go after. But they look for vulnerabilities and then they would pounce. And there was risk in that because they could be seen by people in the park. And then when Amber came in, Amber would quickly get all the resources you can to make sure we could try to find that abductor. What car were they? What they look like? And then put it out on huge messages and let someone know we have a child that was taken or abducted. That would be the key word, abducted. But now the predator could avoid all that. Now they could stay on social media and have the child come to them. So therefore, there are no really alerts that put pressure on them right away. Something that can make them be a little bit sloppy or think second guess themselves and leave the kid. No, they have their targets come to them. It's what's it called? Like Uber delivery. I'm not Don't mean to say it as a joke, but if I could build a metaphor, they don't have to go out and pick up their food. They can have it delivered. And that's got to be a scary thought for many people. I would like to think that's a scary thought because that's part of how much the game has changed. I mean, no matter how you look at it, the context is the targets that they want are coming to them. They just got to set up the game a little bit and be a little bit patient. Second question is, when a child says, I know him, or we play together all the time, or he's my favorite artist streamer, how should parents interpret that in today's digital environment? That's a great question because, when we look at some of these cases, sometimes someone does know who they're talking to. In the Celeste, Rivas Hernandez, her friends at school thought she may have been connected with D4VD. Madison Fields, her sister, she told her sister she may have been talking to someone that was 18. I don't know so much about Hailey Buzbee. I forget. But, if your child is honest enough to tell you that these are the people I'm talking to, you should just double check all those people and make sure you put protections on the app that really limit who can talk to her and that it's in a controlled setting. So basically, anybody that's interacting with your child should be someone that you know. And I don't mean just know. I mean, you got to know their screen name and everything. I know whoever my daughter is talking to on these onlines, I know the screen name and who they belong to, the screen name and who that person is. I don't even just take my child's word for it, because you can make simple screen name adjustments. Like Tear Talk 1. So Tear Talk is daddy. Tear Talk 1 you may think is daddy, but it's not daddy. So, a list of all the screen names that they talk to within their very close circle. I don't think no child should be having 300 or 400 people that they're friends with. Are you kidding me? Who the hell does that child know that they have a platform of 300 and 400 friends in their little world? And how does a parent keep up with that? So again, you try to keep the world as close circled as you can, and then ensure that, you have the screen names for the individuals that you have allowed the child to interact with. But if a child does try to tell you they know the individual, he's my favorite artist streamer, you really got to look into it. The scary thing is, even with D4VD, you have someone that had some type of celebrity status, and people may assume, oh, he's a celebrity. He would be a fool if he would do something stupid with my daughter, because he would lose it all. But that's how they manipulate their target. They build trust so they don't have to worry about that external consequence. So we're judging them based on a condition that really doesn't matter in this game that they're playing. Imagine that. I'm judging a possible predator by literally saying, I know they're not going to do anything foolish because of what they've accomplished. They'd be a fool to want to lose it all. But if the predator builds trust with the target, and they could do it in such a manner where they know that their target is not going to snitch, or the moment they do, they go into self-preservation mode and they take their target out. You're relying it on external conditions that don't play into their world, because they're not planning on getting caught. And that's scary when we don't know who our children are talking to, and we make the assumptions on generalized conditions that we feel most reasonable people would agree with. But predators, they're not most reasonable people. So you don't want to, have these generalized conditions that you feel would deter, because they don't deter them. Their big thing is they operate in the dark. So they're not looking to get caught, and they know they're doing something wrong. So when they go into their game, they're putting all their fail safes in play, and they will protect their reputation. That's a way you could look at it. You should look at the other way. As opposed to them jeopardizing their reputation, you should look at the other way, the more aggressive way. They will protect their reputation. And that's what you need to worry about. That's the biggest thing, what they will do to protect their reputation. And I don't think that just plays out on a greater scale for celebrities. That plays out for almost anyone who's a predator that doesn't want to get caught. If their target becomes a risk to their reputation, that target's nothing but an object. And that's scary. That has to scare a lot of you. When I just said that their target, your child, is nothing but an object to them. There is no empathy in a predator. You're either prey or you're a threat. And they'll act accordingly. All right, so I want to talk about familiarity. I want to kind of break down these four. So I got familiarity, then we're going to talk about trust, kind of put it within this context, but I'm sure you could find greater application. Then we'll get into the isolation aspect, and then we'll get into the exploitation, which, again, relevant in my world. And those two books, if you guys get a chance, I would recommend those books and find the genius in how it can be applied into the real world. I mean, a book like this should be given to students in school, 100%. It's the real world. Can't hide it from it. They're seeing it every day. But all because you see something looks like has prison context, it's a world in there too. And we're dealing every day with the people that the world's most afraid of. So take advantage of the lessons that are taught. I have tons of videos on manipulation as well. It would be good for you guys to check it out. And then the more informed you are, because these games are now happening in your home. They're getting to know your child while your child's at home. They're on their electronics. That's why I know some families, the child only uses the phone in front of them. And at night, the phone goes in the parent's bedroom. But they're getting to know your child under your own noses. And that's what gets so frustrated for parents, because they're thinking, man, this was happening under my nose and I didn't see it. So phase one, I got is familiarity. They enter the child's world. So predators don't knock on doors anymore. They log into the same games and platforms our kids use every day. So they go where kids already are, right? So Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, League of Legends, Discord servers, and fan communities have become the new playground. Adults can sit for hours in open lobbies, voice channels, and fan servers without raising suspicion, especially when they pose as peers. They become a teammate or fan connection, not a stranger. First contact is almost always ordinary. Nice shot. Hey, you're cracked at this game. Hey, thanks for the support. Or responding to direct messaging in a fan server. The predator mirrors the child's slang and interest, often to pretend to be their age. They show up consistently. Predators log in at the same time, play the same games, and remember details about the child's life. Over time, that consistency makes them feel like part of the child's inner circle. And they identify vulnerable kids. They pay attention to who sounds lonely or unhappy. You see that with Celeste, Rivas Hernandez, that case. Who complains about parents, or who posts about wanting to run away or feeling misunderstood. You know, it's funny about that too. Back in the day, they would go after the vulnerable children. But to be honest with you, how advanced a predator is, they could make the child feel vulnerable. They can cause division in the home. And that's how they isolate the child from any counter influence to the game. That means that the child is going to be 100% compliant to the influence of the predator, because the predator is slowly doing what they can to cause division in that home. So I would like to say that in some cases, the reason why I like to say running towards, not just to run away, but running towards, is the predators manufacture these runaways. And that has to be taken seriously. These predators manufacture the runaways. They're making them runaways. Hailey Buzbee, federal documents show 39-year-old Tyler Thomas met 17-year-old Hailey through gaming platforms like Roblox and League of Legends, then maintained frequent online contact. He wasn't a sudden stranger. He had become part of her gaming life before anything escalated. Celeste Rivas Hernandez reports and coverage indicate 14-year-old, often reported as 15-year-old Celeste, but we know she was 14 during this time, maybe even younger when they first met, 13. Celeste was deeply involved in online spaces and fan communities around singer D4VD. She appeared in his live streams and social content, suggesting that whatever began as a parasocial fan relationship had turned into direct access and familiarity. And guys, I'm going to show you something, a video I highly recommend, because this is focused on that parasocial relationship. And if you guys aren't aware what that term parasocial is, I'll explain it. But I want to show you something. I recommend this video right here. There's 3 of them. So when celebrities notice you, the full title of this one is When Celebrities Notice You, Your Parasocial Collapse.
Cam's check.
Hold on. When celebrities notice you, parasocial collapse in the Celeste Rivas Hernandez story. And let me show you the picture behind that. This one here is when fans become targets. The biggest concern here is what happens when you have a fan who's so in love with this celebrity, very superficial, and the celebrity messages them back. I also did when they were trying to blame Celeste's family for the runaway. There's so many videos on that Celeste Rivas Hernandez case related to grooming that I really want you to just go through the playlist, but definitely this would partner well with these. All the videos I've done on those cases would partner well with this because it showcases the process of grooming. But it is all about the familiarity at first. And also, don't forget, gaming also adds some pressure. So the pressure of gaming, the need for support, whatever it is, can also increase in the familiarity, make it move a little bit quicker, because then the vulnerable target becomes dependent on the predator. So the familiarity stage, you know what I mean by familiarity is constantly showing up. You know, it's funny, if you think about how this plays out, if you... I remember this in school. Tell me if this makes sense to you. If I was new to a school, the people that sat closest to me would probably be the people that I was friends with first, because I would see them more often, and they were the ones closest to me. And then eventually my network would expand through more casual interactions. But the ones that are closest to me, there's the gaming platforms, the private messages, and the fact that I see them, they're right next to me. That's what builds familiarity, and then eventually the walls start to lessen. So one of the questions here is, in both Hailey and Celeste's case. Oh, wait, real quick about the celebrity. You know, lately, because social media, they don't really have a lot of background checks here. So there are a lot of people that assume the influencer role that has been getting caught up. So again, as I mentioned before, when they start getting into your child's direct messaging, that's a concern. That child's already in too deep. And the sad thing is, you may not always see those messages occurring. So there's a lot of, this is hard because you can't control every choice your child's going to make, especially the choices that they make in the dark. And as the child gets older, you tend to give them a little bit more trust because that's how the world works. You know, Hailey Buzbee was 17. You would figure by this age, you know, she's moving in the right direction. So maybe, I'm scared to say, you can justify stepping back a little bit, but you really can't, because grooming isn't based on age. It's based on accessibility, vulnerability, and just how good a predator is overall. So you have to do what you can to protect your child from the choices that they're going to make, even when you're not around. And that does require you to have influence over them to some extent. Or if you're not the person that has the best influence with your child, who does? That's in more of an adult role. Sometimes it's not always mom and dad that they feel comfortable with. Sometimes it's Uncle Tony that they talk to, Uncle Tony that they feel more comfortable with, because you have to go into an area where the child feels comfortable. Because if they make a mistake, sometimes they may feel that they're going to be judged. And if I go to mommy and daddy, they're more concerned about getting in trouble than they are protecting themselves. How scary is that? So that's another thing. When they do make mistakes, you really can't approach it as judgment, because then they won't tell you when they continue to make mistakes. I know I try to build metaphors. This is a very simple metaphor, but if you guys ever had a dog, every time the dog goes to the bathroom in the house, you smack the dog, but the dog doesn't know any better. So all the dog knows is that they can't go to the bathroom in front of you. So they start to hide. And then you get shit in areas you never had shit before. That's why you have to approach the dog with no judgment, if that makes any sense, and work with the dog so the dog understands what they're doing is wrong, and not so much focused on the punishment of doing wrong, because then they just stop doing it in front of you. So again, you got to build some way to create a positive influence on them, so they know the consequences of their actions, but they also can talk to somebody when they're going through moments of ambiguity, because that's what the predator does take advantage of. They take advantage of moments of ambiguity, and you need somebody to be able to fill that gap. You need somebody to be next to them that fills that gap, and it has to be somebody that they have a connection to, that they feel that they won't be judged if they have made mistakes, because I want to protect my child. I'm not here judging you. And the child may be more concerned about the judgment than they are about protecting themselves. So again, you're building some type of trust with the child, but you have to always maintain that influence. And again, as much as you want to protect the child from the harsh realities of what a predator can do, they're going to go into the child's world, sadly. So you have to get your self-preservation, technically, not to have the dialogue because you feel it's uncomfortable, or not to have the child exposed to the dialogue if you're not the one that could create that influence, but somebody else could. You got to do it. You can't worry about being uncomfortable, because if that's the only thing that's stopping you, then it's going to make your child more vulnerable. So you got to have those dialogues and not say, well, my child doesn't need to hear that. No, they do. They do. Trust me, they do. And now we just got to find the right person to sit down with that child and explain everything. And I mean, literally, within the means that the child could understand it. That's fair enough. That's the translation process. It's uncomfortable maybe at first because you haven't translated in a way that is for the child to understand. And that's where sometimes even help and guidance can get you there. And I think Bill Buzbee, what he's trying to do is a pretty good move, because they are going to do some education in schools. So I think working with the teachers, because they know your kids' worlds very well, they can help translate it in a way that the child would understand it. And how do games, Discord servers, and fan communities make it easier for adults to feel like part of the group around teens without anyone seeing it as suspicious at first? Because the platform itself invites many people to enjoy that platform. So if I'm on Roblox and I'm an adult, some kids may just see me as enjoying the game. He's a gamer. He's not a predator. So the label changes things of how that person is seen in that world. I mean, yes, there are some kids that will judge a 39-year-old playing games. I mean, I still play games, and I'm 48. So you do have some. That's actually not a bad thing. Very cynical, but it's not a bad thing because it keeps them on their toes. But there are some that can actually automatically justify someone of that age being in their group because he's a gamer and he's good at it. So they don't refer to him as 39-year-old pedophile. He's a gamer. He knows how to play the game. So how they label that individual in their world matters, and we have to be on top of that as well. When they ask before about the question, about the kid saying, well, I know him, they know they have labeled him, and they are standing by the protected label that they gave him, and that's dangerous. I talk about that in my manipulation book as well. Labels matter because it directs how you see that individual. So they may see him as a gamer, you may see him as something else, and now the discussion is a battle of how you guys see that individual. And they may have a label that's more solidified by the behaviors of that individual. I know he's a gamer because he plays these games and he's good at it. Very simple, superficial at their level. Your label for who that person may be is a bit more complex for them to understand because it's less surface. It's underneath. They see what's on top. You're going 6 levels deep. And that's where the translation can get a little bit blurry and lost. But we have to find a way to connect that. We have to see how they label the people in their worlds that are building familiarity with our children. How do they see those individuals? And then work from that perspective and paint what could be under the surface that they may not be able to see so clearly because they're young and they're inexperienced. So again, familiarity kind of breaks down that wall. And then when they go into the private messages, at first the kids could still be talking to the label because you could see if you're aware of who they're talking to, how do they defend him? They defend the label. Maybe not even so much the person. They'll defend the label. He's a gamer. He helps me. He's a great teammate. Those are defending his behaviors that connect to the label. The biggest concern comes when they defend the individual they don't know. So this goes beyond the label. So at first, maybe he's a great gamer. He knows how to play the game. He makes a great teammate, defending the label. But next time around, you go to approach him. Oh, he's a good person. He helps me when I need it. Helps you in what? And just the game? Or you having private dialogues with the individual because now they're defending the person. And that could be a concern. That's the next level up. So again, when they get into the private messaging, I mean, that's the biggest concern. You don't want it to get there. But they allow for the predator, especially in sessions, Snapchat, Discord, they allow for the predator to move past the label and build some connection with your child that's a lot more deep than we can understand. Because a lot of people, when their child first gets caught, a lot of them will say, not my child. This is impossible. This ain't what they normally do. And you could be 100% correct. But how well do we really know our children? Let's be honest. Our children, some we can know very well. I get it. Some of them just know how to perform. And they do their things in the dark because they don't want to get in trouble. So there's not like, especially if you have a good relationship with your children and they want to maintain that good relationship and they want to maintain how you see them, they don't always are honest with you when they make a mistake or they do something foolish because, again, they fear judgment. So they hide things from you, not really in an effort to be deceptive, but maybe an effort to protect their image, how they want to be seen by you. So again, you may think you have the perfect child, but that could be just how they want you to perceive them. So, and that's going to be harsh for people to say, but think about it, guys. Everybody that, a lot of people, when they report their child missing, the first thing they say is, it's not like our child. This is not what they normally do. I'm stunned. And yet here they are, packed with a backpack, possibly getting into a car. So again, having those dialogues with your children or with someone with a better influence over your child, it doesn't always have to be the parent. I get it. It's got to be approached with curiosity, not judgment, because you'll put the child's defenses up and you won't get into the heart of the discussion that needs to happen to help your child make better choices. All right, let's get to the next section. Sorry, guys, I got a lot of notes here. So this is section 2. I lost it for a second. Now we're going to trust. So this is what kind of moves past the label. This is where relationships are built. And sometimes trust can come in superficial avenues for children. Trust could be truly based on behaviors and not anything deeper than that. Oh, he buys me things for the game, helps me play better. He's a great teammate, so that makes him a great person. It's superficial because the children really don't know or have a lot of experience to connect things beyond what they see in front of them. So that label of a good teammate in their mind could encompass them as a person, when that person could be a great teammate, but they are a shit individual. But for them, it's easier to generalize than to be as specific, because they don't even know. They don't know how the world works. They don't see past the performative. So they become the person your child confides in. Now, mind you, I want to mention something here when it comes to trust. So we talked about familiarity, because they're entering the world that your child is in, that your child lives in, that your child exists in. So they also communicate with your child at their level. Celeste Rivas Hernandez, I think she was a bit of a loner to some extent. And he was able to connect to that. I mean, he pretty much, David, personified an image on being a loner. So they connect to that image right away, and they may not understand that the image that they're connecting to is just a performance. It's not who they are. And they groom based on that vulnerability. They're exploiting your child, and eventually it will become that divide to where no one understands you but me. And then the added thought that you're more mature than that the world sees you as. I know you're only 13, 14, but you're a lot more mature than that. And which kid doesn't want to be mature? So after familiarity, the predator works to become the child's favorite person to talk to, the one they go to with their feelings and secrets. Because remember, the first thing that they're putting off that table is what I said before. There's no judgment when you talk to me. I'm here for you. I care about you. You can trust me. So flattery and you're special. So you have classic grooming language includes you're so mature for your age. You get me in ways others don't. And you're different from other girls and guys. This flatters the child and positions the predator as someone who truly sees them. Then you get the personal questions that are dressed up as caring. Questions about fights at home, school stress, mental health, and friendships let the predator map out vulnerabilities and supervision levels while appearing supportive. What do you mean you never talk to your family? What do you mean your family doesn't know when you run away for days? They don't care if you come back or not. So your father's not home at all? Your mother's not home when you get home? You're by yourself? And what do you mean at school you have no friends? How could you have no friends? And look, they're trying to discover that child's world. Are there obstacles? Do I want to go after a child that has great supervision, or do I want to go after a child that is already vulnerable? I just got to push them over the edge a little bit. I mean, do I want to get a child that they're going to know that's missing right away, or a child that's already unknown to the world? Lately, sadly, they've been rolling the dice on both sides. But for the most part, if the vulnerability is already there, it's less of an obstacle for me to have to deal with. It's already there. But granted, doesn't mean they're safe. Because if I really want that child and I'm a predator, I can create vulnerability. I can isolate that child, build influence, and then eliminate them from any counter influence. I can create something in their head that pushes the divide that may never have existed to begin with. They know how to create a perceived environment that could make a child vulnerable who never was vulnerable. That's why in some cases it could be shocking. But if they're talking to your child uninfluenced and they're building trust, eventually trust will supersede the logic. The child will start believing everything that the predator says. And remember, they have to paint themselves as that go-to person. So you got the trauma bonding. So offenders often share their own pain, real or invented, to create mutual vulnerability and emotional dependence. Kind of like, I got you because I've been there. The image of David as a loner, as I said, automatically reflected to Celeste Rivas, who I believe was a bit of a loner. And she saw in him a lot of who she thought she was. And that connection was just in how she saw him. Her initial impression of him. And initial impressions, man, they are powerful. Because the initial impression of how you view somebody defines everything afterwards. It's just how it works. It defines everything afterwards. Even when you break away from that initial oppression, people will give you forgiveness because they'll go back to how powerful that initial impression was, who you were when we first met. Kind of like the honeymoon thing too. What is it? The honeymoon effect? You go with somebody and then you start to change your ways and you go back to how it was in the honeymoon. And at that point, that's all performative. But we don't see it that way. We see it as foundational. And technically, it's as you get more comfortable, the truth of who you are really comes out. And the glimpses is who you really are. And sometimes a young kid, they don't understand that. They think the glimpses are just, oh, that's not really him. Why? Because when I first met him or I listened to his music. So initial impressions are extremely, extremely powerful because they're surface and they're easy, but they're an anchor. Gifts and access. So in-game currency, skins, ranks, boosts, concert tickets, travel, or direct access to famous persons functions as reward and leverage. Cases tied to Roblox and Discord show predators using Robux and in-game advantages to keep kids attached and compliant. Let me ask you a question here. And this matters. How can a loving parent compete with that? How could a loving parent compete with D4VD and what he could provide her, especially if it's a family that's struggling? How can a loving parent compete with the superficial things that connect the child right off the bat? Because remember, it's behaviors. Sometimes you ask a child, how do you know your dad loves you or something? Oh, he buys me games. They don't know any better. They don't know what love is. Love is sacrifice, stuff that they don't see. But in this case here, it's very superficial. And it's a very powerful connect between them and your child. A very powerful connect that makes it hard for the parents to get ahead of. That to me is one of the biggest concerns when the parents are out-resourced and the child is still very superficial in their connection with that individual. The relationship feels real. So over time, the child sees the connection as a genuine romance or best friendship, not a danger. And this is especially powerful when the adult is a public figure, streamer, or musician, because social status amplifies the perceived value of the relationship. In the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case, she's with David. That gives her rank and status. That's why she was able to tell her friends who she's with, because that gave her some status. But she didn't really tell her parents, because her parents said or her mother only knew him as D4VD or David, didn't know really much about him. But the friends did, because it made sense for her to tell her friends, because I'm going to get status on that. You want to call me a loner? You want to call me a loser? Look who I got DMing me. So it makes sense for her to give them that information. I'm telling you guys, when you profile things, you got to look at every angle. You got to understand every side of the coin. You can't understand the predator without understanding the victims. And you can't understand the victims without understanding the circumstances. So for Hailey Buzbee, records show Thomas visited Hailey's area months before her disappearance using his cards at nearby businesses, including a restaurant where she worked. And that kind of investment in physical presence fits a pattern of moving from online trust building to real-world closeness. Celeste Rivas Hernandez, coverage and interviews indicate Celeste and singer D4VD David had matching tattoos. If that's the case, some of the stuff still has to be confirmed. A love song with her name and visible affection in online content. Her family and peers were reportedly aware she was involved with an older, successful musician, blurring the lines between relationship, grooming, and exploitation. I would say more the friends. The family kind of had an idea, but they didn't really know. So I have two questions here. Looking at Hailey and Celeste, what specific behaviors tell you these weren't just normal relationships, but grooming, even when others around them seem to accept it? Well, to be honest, a lot of it comes after the fact, especially with the age of, what was Tyler, 39 or whatever it was? Is it Tyler? What's his name? Tyler Thomas, that's his name? Was he 39? David was 17, I think, when they first met. And we kind of touched on most of this stuff for this question. But the next question, how does status, being famous artist or a cool older gamer, supercharge the grooming process and silence red flags for both kids and adults. Kind of touched on this before. The child connects to the label, the superficial part of the label. And the label does provide the predator with some level of protection in how that child views the person, the influencer, or whoever's. In Thomas's case, could be he's a good gamer, and that's what protects the predator, because the child first sees them as that label, and then eventually that is able to help them connect to them on a more deeper level. Also, sadly, the family may see it the same way too if they know a little bit about the individual. How many times we see the label of priest protect the predator, the label of teacher protect the predator? And it's funny because parents will say there's no way a teacher would do that. Okay, you're now using the label to protect the predator. Or there's no way a priest would do that. Okay, but what about if somebody was to become a priest just for that reason? Is that possible? Yes, 100% possible. So we sometimes also feel it's safer to fall back on the label because, God forbid, we were so blind that we put our child in harm's way. We let our child go to that school. We let our child go to that priest. So our defense as adults is to fall back on the label as well as protection. There's no way a priest would never do that. You didn't say Tyler. You didn't say D4VD. There's no way a priest would ever do that. There's no way an influence would ever do that. But the individual who has the label can, who's using that label to protect their predatorial aggression or predatorial actions. Labels are how we see people. The initial impression is usually based on a label. How many times you have a dialogue with someone, you ask them what they do. When I don't know you, we're having a dialogue. I ask you what you do because sometimes my first impression of you, when I know nothing about you, may relate to my familiarity with the type of work that you do. So I try to look at that. I mean, I could be also competing. What do you do versus what do I do? Who could possibly make more money? I mean, you could have some ego in there as well, but there's also a part of me understanding the work you do and then trying to see if I can figure out who you are from the type of work that you do. Very superficial. I get it. And really will not give you the answers that you need. But when you're first meeting somebody, you're drawn from any type of context, and labels do come a part of it. Again, some could be in competition, but most of the time it's you recognize the person by that label. 100%. It's a question that will be asked. And then you lean on the label to try to figure out who that person is right from the get-go, even though man, I carry that much weight, but it's a start. So labels matter. Let's talk about isolation. We've got 2 more phases left. Phase 3, isolation. They cut off every safety net. So once they have trust, predators move to separate the child from anyone who might challenge or stop the relationship. There's the counter influence. So they're going to move off platforms into secrecy. So from Roblox, League of Legends, to Snapchats and sessions. Predators push for public game chats or comment sections into private DMs, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and encrypted apps like Sessions or Signal. And they frame this as convenience or intimacy. Only my close friends are here. I don't like people in my business. They do what they can to justify the need to have the private chat. Selling secrecy as love. Don't tell your parents. They wouldn't understand. People are jealous of what we have. The internet will twist this. Let's keep it our secrecy. Let's keep it ours. Secrecy becomes proof of commitment, not a warning sign. See, that's something that's interesting, and I want to explore that. So when we go into the DM chat and I finally hit you up and we're communicating, some children may think, this is really secret. Something's wrong here. Something doesn't feel right. Why is this being done in secret? And hopefully most children do the right thing. But I think the predator is aware that this is a risk for them. Because remember, their whole plan is, okay, so I'm building this familiarity. I got to get that child into a private chat. Now, some could be pushy and try too quick, and it automatically backfires because it's too quick. It's too aggressive. I just met you and you're already trying to private chat me. Unless the child's extremely vulnerable, predator is going to invest some more time before they do that. But then when they finally do, when they know that the child is going to have concerns about having these dialogues in secret. They quickly talk about secrecy being more of a commitment to what they've already established. And the predator is going to put already at the forefront the concerns that may be going into the child's mind already, and he's easing those concerns, or she's easing those concerns, because the predator is already aware of how their actions are going to be perceived, because one, they're very aware of how predators are seen, but two, they know what they're doing. So a lot of the stuff that they ease up front is really self-emissions. It's true, but it really is. It's pretty much self-emissions of what they're going to be doing. They know what they're doing, and they know it's wrong. So the secrecy is really premeditation. It's covering up what could come off that the child could pick up real quick, but now they use it, the label of commitment. Hey, listen, no one's going to really understand this because of our age gap, but we just have this connection. That's the predator knowing that this is wrong, but they're getting ahead of it. So they disguise it under commitment. And the scary thing about that is when they push for the commitment, they're also acting on the hope that the child could feel, I would say, first, guilt for violating that commitment. I think guilt could be something that a child could feel at a certain age. It's not too much of a complex feeling. I don't know how they would translate that, because sometimes children, they don't know the spectrum of feelings. So sometimes children, when they may feel something, but they may justify it as simpler feelings like anger or happiness, when there's a lot more complexity to that. But I think guilt is something the predator can play on, because for the commitment, I don't want you violating the commitment. So if I push that secrecy as a commitment of who we are together and how much I've helped you, and at this point here, I'm trying to build a relationship based on that commitment, then I think that what stops the child from reporting it right away could be some level of confusion that translates to guilt. Because the moment the child is confused, that's when I think the predator can play into all the things that I've done to help you. So you have to trust me on this. And then the child, in that moment of confusion, now starts leaning on the predator's influence. Remember, there's no counter influence here, because this is acting in isolation. So the ambiguity is only going to get answered by the person that this child relates or trusts the most, which is what the predator is trying to do. Remember, in moments of ambiguity, we look to our environment to see what we should do. And we usually look to the people that we trust the most. So if I can isolate you and build that trust, I know there's ambiguity here. So now when you speak to me, I could alleviate the ambiguity and then start pushing in a message that works better with the narrative of grooming with the young child. So you're selling the secrecy as love, commitment. So I think guilt, because love is a bit complex. I think guilt is something a child can understand. I do. So I think they play into that in that moment of ambiguity. Then you have undermining other relationships. So predators may portray parents as controlling. I think they did that with Celeste Rivas Hernandez case. Friends as immature, and anyone who raises concerns as haters or obsessed. This leaves the child feeling only the predator truly understands them. Sorry guys, my phone. Hold on one second. Sorry guys, I'm back. Let me just get my notes. I apologize for that. So okay. So for the parents, the divide would be a message of control. Because think about this. I'm the predator. I want the least amount of control. That's an obstacle for me. So I need to move away. I need to move the child away from that level of control. And that's definitely something the predators could play into in order to get the child engaged. They could talk about the control, because the child also may think that they're more mature than they really are. So my parents don't have to watch out for me. I know what I'm doing. And then the predator could play into that, so the child could feel like they're making more independent choices. But at that point, the influence from the parents are lessening. They're actually not making independent choices. They're being influenced by the predator, but they don't know that. And then I like when it says friends is immature, because that pushes the child up to a different maturity level. And again, what child doesn't want to be more mature for their age? So if their friends say, hey, that person that you're with is a little bit older, the child can say, well, it's not really about age in their mind. It's about, you're saying that I'm not mature enough to be with him. Is that what you're saying? Well, he believes I'm mature. That's why I'm telling you, friends, they know. They know. They usually tell somebody, so it's always good for the friends to say something immediately. And guys, if you're in that position, if you are a friend and you're watching this, I get it that you may be more concerned with preserving the relationship with your friend than you are about doing the right thing. Worry about the friendship later. If they come around, they come around. If they don't, you save the life. But sometimes the reason why they don't go forward is because they're concerned about the relationship that they have with their friend. Because now they are also swearing their friend to secrecy. And then the friend gets more concerned about, well, if I say something, then I could lose my friend forever. You're going to lose your friend forever if you don't. You roll the dice on doing the right thing, and hopefully they come around. And if they don't, that's their fault, not yours. So behavior changes at home. Kids may hide screens, switch apps quickly, stay up later, pull away from family activities, or become defensive about who they're talking to. And again, that's extremely important. You should see those change of behaviors. Those should be visible. Kind of now you can see that the person may be having an outside influence. They're not as talkative anymore. There's a rush to get back onto their electronic. Because remember, they're acting on emotion. And they're oh, he told me to call him at 4 o'clock. I got to call him at 4. But I don't want my parents knowing. So it's good at that point to kind of look at them, make sure that, or know your children. Let's just do it that way. Know what behaviors seem out of the ordinary. If we're usually spending time together at dinner, but now you're rushing and you want to get to the phone real quick, you should check that. The change of behaviors, I think, is one of the biggest red flags that go underlooked. Because sometimes we don't see it. So sometimes as an adult, if I'm a father and my daughter starts changing in certain things, I may find ways to justify it for her. Oh, that's not really her. She's having, she's just been busy. And, I know lately she hasn't been having dinner with us, or she hasn't been spending time with us. But I think she's going through a lot of things. We find ways to justify their behavior as opposed to just stopping them and entering that moment of uncomfortability and saying, hey, what's going on with you? We used to spend a lot of time together, and now you're really caught up on this gaming world, and feel like things are changing. So I think it's something that should be addressed head on. The change in behavior, to me, as I said, is the biggest red flag. And then you have the encryption and deletion as deliberate tactics. We know about that, right? So some offenders choose apps and settings where messages disappear. Keys can be wiped, or logs are hard to recover, specifically to avoid detection and later accountability. I did a whole video on sessions. You could see it in one of the videos I did for Madison Fields. So for Hailey Buzbee, investigators say Hailey's communication with Thomas moved from gaming platforms to Discord, then the Snapchat, and eventually to Session, an encrypted messaging app. According to an FBI affidavit, he deleted Sessions and its access code from his phone, making it impossible to recover their messages. Her leaving home at 3 a.m. to meet him shows how thoroughly he had become her reference point, overriding family safety. He got her to leave at 3 a.m. That's not a choice that she made without being controlled by him. That's why that's not a runaway. They should not be labeled as a runaway. And we think she pretty much died that day. For Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and by the way, they didn't up her alert till like 15 days later as endangered. For Celeste Rivas Hernandez, reporting and analysis note that Celeste had been listed as missing for over a year before her remains were found in the trunk of a Tesla linked to D4BD. David, online commentary and PI interviews suggest she was still appearing in his orbit at events and content or around his circle during periods when she was technically a runaway, indicating a level of isolation from her family while staying connected to his world. There are also mentions of Discord interactions and deleted accounts and coverage of alleged communication between them. So the news, TMZ, I was a little upset with them on this case because when David had his lawyer, the defense lawyer, come in, their narrative started to change about Celeste Rivas Hernandez. And they started blaming the family, which to me, what young teen doesn't have superficial concerns with their family? What young teen isn't a troubled young teen? But they put the troubled teen generality out there, and they made it look like the family was the bad guy because of stuff that she was saying to her friends. And they interviewed this one kid that said something that just about her having concerns with her family. Why? Because they put a curfew on her. All kids are going to have concerns. They want freedom. The family is concerned about that. So they put control. You got to earn your freedom with me. So that's an age where they want to be more free. They think they're more mature, and the parents have to clamp down a little bit. And that's always going to be a time in any growing up where you're going to have that conflict. The child wants more freedom, and the parents are concerned. They clamp down a little bit more, try to get the earned trust. But the divide could have been influenced. So whatever she's telling to her friends and all this stuff about the negativity, the problems at home, how do we know that's really coming from her? How do we know that's not being influenced by the predator? And when TMZ ran these narratives that she came from a troubled home, that's why she ran away. And they even try to blame the fact that she tried to say she was older. Come on. How disgusting. We don't know if the trouble that how she perceived it wasn't influenced. That's why these people that run these shows, they don't know these games, and they paint this narrative that's far from the truth to the point where the victim becomes the one that caused it to happen, which now minimizes David. They're not on the same scale. She can make 10 million wrong choices. He's still responsible for his one negative choice, the ultimate predator, if this is what the case is. Same thing with Thomas. Kid makes a foolish choice and you share the percentage on the same scale? Hell no. Hailey could have been 100% wrong in what she did. That doesn't mean that Thomas is 0% for what he did. You don't put them on the same scale. They're going to make stupid decisions. That's what kids do. That person's 100% responsible regardless of what the decisions these kids make. Because he's an adult. He's a fucking predator. I hate that. I did I'm sorry. I did videos on my feelings towards that. So if you look at my TMZ stuff, I did videos on that. It's disgusting. That was outright disgusting, where you have the girl runs away, okay, because she's being influenced by someone with status. And all of a sudden, with the story starts to shift where the family's at fault or she made the bad choice. Are you kidding me? That is just, they put them on the same scale. So in both Hailey and Celeste cases, what are the most disturbing indicators that these girls have been isolated emotionally and digitally long before their deaths? Something is also their growth in their perspective for such a young age, because sometimes influencers can, when they isolate the child, they can kind of say things that are a little bit too mature for the child. And sometimes that can carry off to the child talking to the adult in ways they never did before. Wow, that's a grown-up perspective. Where'd that come from? Where are you getting that from? And again, you got to approach you got to be careful on how you approach that, because you need your child to open up, not to close down. So you have to approach it with a level of curiosity, but of course, having your sirens go off. But for here, I think the indicators also is maybe some divide at home that really wasn't happening before, at a level of understanding that, how does my child even know that? Like what happened here? So you have to look for the chance that the influence is changing your child's demeanor and their behaviors. Behaviors would probably be the first thing you would see, and then you would have to approach that with a level of curiosity and not judgment. And then you would have to kind of see, okay, this really isn't my child right now, and I got to figure out what's happening here. They don't just jump to this one extreme. It's step by step by step. So you kind of have to notice the smallest of step, because if you don't, it only gets bigger. So I know sometimes some parents may notice it when it's too late, when the leap has been made. But it's never really just a leap. It's small, subtle steps. So you have to approach it at the initial time you see it, but you have to find a way to approach it in a manner where the child doesn't feel judged. And again, you may not be the person to do it. You may have to, Uncle Tony could do it, whatever the case may be, but you have to catch it, because grooming is done gradually. And if you wait too long, the person or the child could already be committed to their behaviors. So it becomes harder now to get them to change because they're already at that level of commitment. So you can kind of get to them at the very beginning when they're just testing the waters, where they're not as committed. It's ambiguous for them. And that's where you have to find the best route to create some influence before they start traveling up those steps in towards commitment. And sometimes what stops families is the fact that they may be uncomfortable with that level of conflict or confrontation. And I get it, but you shouldn't see it as that way. And again, you have to find someone that can talk to your child, I guess. And if it's you, that's great. If it's not you, pass it off to someone that you can trust. But it's not meant to be something that is supposed to be a conflict or a confrontation. It's supposed to be built on a level of understanding. It becomes a conflict or confrontation. I like the word confrontation because it's more on the other end of the spectrum. I like the word confrontation because it becomes confrontation when you are going into it when the child already has commitment. Now it becomes definitely confrontation because you're battling with the obstacles of someone who's at the back end of already being groomed. You have to get it in the process. So it really is how much you know your child and catching the subtle behaviors that would really go unnoticed and not unnoticed, and don't dismiss it or minimize it, because that change could be something that could be being influenced into a greater scale. But if you wait to the other end, then you're battling against commitment, which is a greater obstacle. And now it's going to be confrontation because your child is going to have to, in their mind, protect the choices that they have made to get to the level that they're at. This is not just a leap, as I mentioned before. I know they leap, that you see the leap. No, these are steps, and they have to justify each step that they go before they get to that final commitment. So when you go to confront them and they're already at that commitment stage, they're at the other level of the jump, you're battling the obstacle of already justified choices in their mind. So it will become confrontational. How can parents distinguish between a normal teen pulling away a bit and a teen who's being actively isolated and controlled by someone else? I think I kind of mentioned that already. No need to reiterate, but I think it's the subtle steps that go unnoticed. You have to know your child enough to know that, hey, that's not like them, no matter how small it is, and try to work on addressing it in the moment before it becomes 6 levels up and connected to some level of commitment. All right, number 4, it's a game for them, right? This is the exploitation, the coercion, and the escalation. So we went from familiarity to trust, isolation. This is the end result. So once the child is isolated, the groomer shifts from loving friend to someone who uses sex, threats, and control to get what they want. So you got the boundary testing and the sexualization. The predator introduces sexual jokes, asks for selfies, then pushes into exploit conversations and images. And this usually comes after trust and secrecy are well established. This, sadly, at this point, when you get to this level, this is purely the predator and the child. Sadly, at this point, if it got this far, the parents' guardianship are already out of the picture. So this is the knowledge that seems to be the most uncomfortable, that has to be shared with your child, because this is where your child has to make the choices to protect themselves if it's gotten to this level and all efforts have failed. These are the conversations at this point. This is your child in survival mode. And this is the discussions that we have to have with them. Because when it gets to a point where this is happening, it's because your child's already isolated and they're one-on-one with the predator. You got the sextortion. When predators get explicit photos or videos, they may threaten to leak them to friends, family, or online if the child doesn't keep complying. Reports from Thorne and others show sextortion cases involving minors are surging, many starting in gaming and social platforms. So again, the game's already been moving. So now what they're trying to do here as the predator for their own survival is they're trying to maintain control. So maintaining control is really between some level of control in the environment. Don't get me wrong. And they've done that through your child. That's the isolation part. That's the division. They are controlling your child's environment through your child by influencing your child's perspective. That's how they gain control of your child's environment. Their influence on your environment, on their environment, is being carried out through your child, through their perspective, the predator's perspective. So at this point, again, the reason why we want to have these discussions with our children are these are things that they're dealing with directly. That if it gets to this point, it's up for the child to know what to do. Whether they're at an age where they can understand if it's right or wrong, you could push that. And hopefully they could understand it. But the key thing here is they got to know what to do and then why it has to be done. Sometimes the discussing of the why becomes a bit complex and uncomfortable, but it has to be discussed. But at least start off with, this is what has to be done, and we'll talk about the why. But this, what has to be done, is the non-negotiable. And that will give you a chance to translate the why a bit better. Usually in my world, when I try to teach something to somebody, I usually like to go with the why first, but I automatically assume that the how is pretty much understood. But this is survival mode, and this is for children. So I would teach them simply what needs to be done first so they can understand this is where the non-negotiable is. And then we can explore the why, because I don't want in the exploration of why to become so ambiguous that they start to think the how is negotiable. They need to understand at some level that this is why this is non-negotiable. So the consequences of their actions, if they do go to these routes, and again, it's an uncomfortable dialogue, but it has to happen. And then you can cross into what needs to be crossed into when it comes to discussing why these are non-negotiables. Because again, at this point here, this is survival mode, and this is where your child is left alone. How scary is that? We've gotten to a point now where the child is left alone. This right here, this is where the predator wins. This is where the predator wins. And then you have the offline meetings and physical harm. Many cases escalate to in-person meetings. Predators drive across states, book rentals, and arrange specific plans for the child to sneak out. At this point, the child often believes they're going to a boyfriend, not a threat, and the risk of assault or homicide is highest. For Hailey Buzbee, in Thomas' case, federal filings state that agents found photos and videos of Hailey on his device that meet this definition of child sexual exploitation material, some deleted and partially recovered. Records show he booked an Airbnb in Hocking County, Ohio, for 2 guests around the time of her disappearance. Cell data placed him near a trailhead in Wayne National Forest, where Hailey's dismembered remains were later found. And a statement to investigators, referring to wanting to wait until she turned 18, underscored the sexual nature of the relationship and his awareness of her age. Wanted to wait till she was 18. And sometimes they'll tell that to your children, and your children should realize what this is about. 18 is about the physical part. Celeste's case involves a teen girl in a relationship with an adult musician whose fame and power dynamic raises serious questions about grooming and exploitation, even in the absence of public homicide charge. Her body was found wrapped in plastic in a front trunk of a Tesla connected to a David T4VD after she's been missing for an extended period. Online discussions and media investigations point to potential Discord communication, matching tattoos, and a love song bearing her name as indicators of a deeply imbalanced relationship that may have begun when she was younger. I have here 13, but some people say 11 or 12 on Reddit. Let's see. We kind of, in the process of doing this, we kind of went into some protective measures. So I want to try to keep this, it's already over an hour, but it's a lot to discuss. And I have this point on my other videos. I want to just go over, this will be quick. I'm just going to read it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 last areas, and then we can kind of wrap it up just to kind of take with us during this dialogue. One thing is retire stranger danger. The primary threat is often the familiar online presence, the teammate, the creator, the musician who's been normalized in the child's life. Parents must update their mental model. Treat move to private chat as a red alert. Any push to shift from public game chat or comment sections into DMs, Snapchat, Discord, or encrypted apps should trigger scrutiny and conversation. Watch for unexplained digital gifts and access, new skins, Robux, gift cards, concerts, tickets, or travel opportunities the parent didn't authorize need to be questioned. So, definitely know what costs money in those games and see how your child's getting that money for those games. These are more behaviors that actually have evidence behind it. So I think that's something that you could be aware of. Normalize screenshot and tells. Kids should know they can screenshot any uncomfortable or threatening exchange and bring it to an adult without automatically losing all access to text. So if somehow they did get something through the gaming platform or through a direct message, tell them to screenshot it. No matter what the predator does, they can't delete that. So teach them how to take a screenshot. That will definitely, that's something that Snapchat sessions, they can't delete that. Be visibly present online. Parents learning the games, visiting the Discords, and understanding the fan communities their kids inhabit can drastically increase early detection and push for systemic change. In the wake of cases like Hailey and ongoing grooming lawsuits, regulations in counties like LA County are suing platforms such as Roblox for failing to prevent exploitation, and platforms like Discord are rolling out age verification and safety changes. I guess make the difference. Guys, if you like the content, I would definitely show this to schools. I think this, or if you guys know Bo Buzbee, show them this, because this is the start of the education that must go out there to go ahead and create the laws that we need that lead towards prevention. And I'm willing to go out there and speak as well on this habit. I deal with predators all the time, so I'll work with anybody who wants to put something together so we can provide the education to our school systems. I would love to do that. So check out the videos I have. I think this would be important because I know that perspective. I work around them. If you guys like the content, do I buy me a cup of coffee? Link to that's in the description, as well as the top of the YouTube channel. And stay safe.